Hello. Wow. This week has been a crazy kerfuffle as far as going live. So hopefully we have got it right this time. Technology, always so much fun. Yeah. Okay, let's see if we can get everything in here and going properly. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. It has been insane this week. Looks like Tuesday was supposed to be at noon, and then I moved it to 2, and then I couldn't make it to 2 because I was stuck in uh, hospital medical bureaucracy hell. And then this one accidentally got scheduled for noon. And even though I asked that it be double checked this morning, it didn't get double checked. So, hello. Lovely to see you, Joey. Lovely to see you, Cosmopolite. I am so thankful that you managed to find this because, woo, craziness. This has been a crazy week, technology wise, all the things. Crazy, crazy. And a friend of mine also ended up having a heart issue. We had to go in to see them in the hospital, and they're getting double bypass. So, very, very crazy week. Very crazy week. So, hello. But we are talking about boundaries and manipulation this week. So, I'm excited about that because I have some thoughts. And this time, instead of doing it like I normally do, well, I'm going to do it partially like I normally do. I'm going to start off with the book chapter and the information, but I also have some audience participation stuff. I'd really like you to uh, join me on this and talk about some relationship rules that can be manipulative. And we're going to talk about how to make those boundaries that are not manipulative. So, yeah, exciting. I will get started here. Let's see. Move this out of the way. There we go. There we go. So, hello and welcome everyone. For those of you who do not know me, I am Heather. Most people call me Nookie. In addition to living an amazing personal life, I write books, teach classes, and run workshops like this about love, sex, romance, and kink for people of all genders, relationship statuses, orientations, and more. A little bit about me. I have always been curious and adventurous when it comes to sex and to love and to all of those things. And I'm so lucky that I've had partners who have been the same. So I have had the opportunity to explore many facets of sexuality in loving and creative ways through my years. And all of my experiences, every single one of them thus far, have led me to the belief that boundaries are the key, not only to saving ourselves, but our relationships. Boundaries are what take us from getting by or merely average to healthy, loving, strong, and fan fucking tastic. So let's get started. I'm going to kick us off real quick with an introduction to my book and my workshop and how I'm writing everything and sharing it with you. So, for those of you who are not yet aware, I am writing a book about boundaries. I'm going to pop that up on the screen there. Um, And you can get access to the chapters as I write and post them by pre-registering for my Take No Shit workshop beginning Monday, October 17th. The link is in the chat and it is also up on the screen right over there. Really hard to do that. Anyway, hi. Let's talk about boundaries and how boundaries are not manipulation, but can be used to manipulate. Shall we? Hello, KS. It is lovely to see you. So, in my book, I have quite a few chapters about what boundaries are not. And for me, it is critically important to talk about how boundaries are not about manipulating another human. And in the book, I start each chapter with a quote that I feel cuts to the heart of a matter. And in this case, Cloud and Townsend says, when one person is in control of another, love cannot grow deeply and fully as there is no freedom. Okay, so we've been talking through the book and through this series of live videos and so on and so forth about how we are taught, we are socialized, we are raised by being controlled. And the message that many of us receive is we either control others or we allow them to control us for love, for success, for friendship, or whatever. It's a constant like push and pull. How can I get the advantage here? How can I make my point more strongly? How can I get my partner to, fill in the blank, right? How can I get my partner to listen to me more? How can I get my partner to pick up their dirty underwear? How can I get my partner to do the dishes? How can I get my partner to help out around the house? How can I get my partner to let me go out with the guys more often? How can I get my partner to do this? How can I get my partner to do that? So the challenge is, yes, cosmopolite, and that control equals safety, which it seems, right? Seems like if we are in more control of something, we're more safe, right? Except, is that true? Because I would ask, yes, of course, what we're taught. I'm not suggesting that you think that, cosmopolite. This is absolutely what we're taught and what we're socialized to believe. So I would ask those of you in the chat, when you feel like someone is controlling you or someone is trying to control you, do you feel more love? Do you feel more affection? Do you feel more inclined to collaborate with them, to work with them, to make a life together? Most people are going to feel upset, trapped, maybe going to feel like, what do I have to do to get the upper hand right now in this, right? Control or be controlled. They won this time, I get to win next time, trying to keep it balanced. Now, Womanopolis, you say, I love control. The kind of control that you love, though, in kink, is a very, very different beast. That is a consensual control. That is a control, it's not even a control, because honestly, One human can't control another. It's the attempt to control. It is a power exchange. It is something that two people agree to benefit both parties. It's a very different thing than a tug of war that you get in a relationship where two people are trying to control the other person. Yeah. And Cosmopolite says no times 4. Exactly. So being in a relationship where two people are fighting for control is not what we're aiming for, right? But we see it all of the time. And that sinks into us. You know, the sitcoms we see on TV. It's always like, ha ha, that wacky partner of mine, you know, I'll get them next time, right? And oh, you know, there's this, you know, person over there, and if I could just get them to do this, and then hijinks ensue, right? And you know, this person realizes that this person was right all along, and so on and so forth. And it's this constant tension between the partners, because a really balanced, satisfying, functional relationship doesn't make for good comedy, generally speaking, right? Not saying there aren't examples out there. I know that quite a few people have pointed to some relationships like, you know, Modern Family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, where, you know, there's definitely good examples of relationshiping in there. And I'm not knocking those at all. I'm saying that the overwhelming majority of relationships that are shown to us in movies, TV, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, not very functional, and also very, very much a function of control or be controlled, right? KS says, where there is control, there is fear and loss of leverage. Yeah. So there's scrabbling to get that leverage back, right? And that push and pull is draining, incredibly fudging draining. So here's the thing. I said boundaries are not manipulation. So let's talk a little about this. Manipulation comes from a desire to make others act the way we want them to act, to have more control over our world. Manipulation places the blame and the burden of change onto another person. Whereas boundaries, to me, are the opposite. They are saying, this is where I end, and I am responsible for everything in here, including being responsible for my own needs and for removing myself from a situation if those needs aren't being met or if my boundaries are being trampled. Right? Does that make sense? Cosmopolite says, I've seen people misuse the terms boundaries, rules, agreements, and ultimatums. Oh, yes, absolutely. And here's the other thing, though. To me, I mean, while I agree that boundaries and rules are different, and agreements and ultimatums are, you know, like different, and so on and so forth, to me, people use these words, and sometimes they use them correctly, but they're still ultimately harming their relationships because they're continuing to grasp for control, right? As opposed to creating, for lack of a better term, the round table, right? King Arthur's round table. Everyone was equal. Everyone sat at an equal type of height and space, and so on and so forth. That's ultimately what we're going for in a relationship, right? That we're relating with somebody who we feel is our equal. Hello, Sabyasachi. It is always a pleasure to see you. Hello, Sir Thomas. Good afternoon. So, using a boundary that I've been talking about in the book, I will not allow people in my life to make me feel less than, right? An example of manipulation could be if you ever use that word towards me again, I will leave you. Manipulation, ultimatum, right? Because, stay with me here, by saying, if you ever use that word towards me again, I will leave you, you are giving away your power over the encounter and the relationship, putting it into their hands and giving them a lever to manipulate you in return. You can't leave me. I never used that word again, just like you asked. I didn't make you feel less than. I didn't use that word. And if another word made you feel less than, you should have given me the exact same opportunity, right? You're also, in that statement, not taking any responsibility for your own insecurity or reaction to their words. You're not taking action towards something positive for you, but instead focusing on your partner doing what you want them to do or not doing what you don't want them to do to fix the problem. Are you with me on this? Give me a little poke in the chat. Yes, I'm getting this. This makes sense. Hello, Roger. Lovely to see you. I don't seek to control anyone. However, it tends to happen on one side or the other. I've always been in charge of most people at work. I try not to come off that way at home, but I fail at it. Okay. So the more you know, right? And what do they say that, admitting it is half the battle? So, what are some examples of manipulation when it comes to boundaries? What are some ways that we might use boundaries to gain control over other people? What are some ways that people might have used boundaries to gain control over you? So, Cosmopolite said, someone told me if you don't do X, we can't be friends. That's an ultimatum and manipulation. Absolutely. Absolutely, it is. 100%. Now, we're going to talk about turning this around. So, from my perspective and the perspective of the way I write and the way I teach, we make this a healthy boundary. Okay. So, let's say, my personal boundary is I will not allow people in my life that make me feel less than, right? And we're having a conversation, and it comes the time where I could say, if you ever use that word towards me again, I will leave you, right? Instead, perhaps I say, whoa, hey, not feeling great about the way this conversation is going. I'm going to head home and cool off and process this because I don't feel like staying here and continuing right now is going to be good or healthy for either of us, right? So, what did I just do there? I maintained my boundary, how I was feeling, did not put the burden onto them to make it right, did not put the burden onto them to change who they are as a person, did not blame them. I simply honored my own boundary and said, this is what I'm going to do to protect it. Does that make sense? The difference between don't do that, which again, ultimatum, don't do that, or this will happen. Or what about manipulation in the sense of you always do that and it makes me feel X, right? That's pretty bad. You always do fill in the blank, and it makes me feel fill in the blank. Yeah. Boundary is self-control, not other control. Ding, 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 ding. Right? Recently, in exploring past bad habits or emotional abuse, I realized that if someone I care for criticizes me, I need to be thinking of how I've caused them to feel, not taking that as an invitation to exchange insults or criticisms. Yes. And not everyone can do that in the moment. That is an ideal. If someone comes to me and says, "Gosh, Heather, you're making me feel shitty." Generally speaking, my ideal is to take a deep breath and go, "Wow, wasn't expecting that. I'm sorry." And to process it as much as possible and to find out more and to do what I can about it. We're not all at that level. And I'm not even always at that level every single time it happens, right? So that is a perfect ideal. Just realize if you're not perfect and you're not ideal, it's still okay, right? Just make sure and maintain your boundaries. Step away for a while until you can re-engage. Ryan says, this feels like an invitation to revisit one of Nookie's favorite topics, logical fallacies. Ooh, yes. Off the top of my head, instances of moving the goalposts and no true Scotsman comes to mind. Absolutely. So if you don't do this, then this, and then they do this, and you're like, but I didn't want it like that. I wanted you to want, this is one of my favorites. I don't want you to do the dishes. I want you to want to do the dishes. That's what Jennifer Aniston said to her co-star. I don't remember what it was, in a movie. And he said back, who in their right mind wants to do the dishes? Right? And therein we get into the problem of, I want you to do this. Okay, I'll do this. No, I want you to do this and be happy about it. Why would I be happy about it? I don't like mucking out the toilets. Yuck, right? Or if you really loved me then, right? And then adding on to that more and more and more, moving the goalposts, no true Scotsman, et cetera, et cetera. Roger says, I tried that. It just made her madder. But that's okay. Because you are not responsible for other people's emotions. You are responsible for taking care of yourself and removing yourself from a situation if you feel that your boundaries are being stepped on. Yeah. Ryan, of course, always on point with the pop culture references. Vince Vaughn, Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn in The Breakup. Thank you. Cosmopolite says, in my situation, that person could have simply said, I don't think we're on the same page. I'm going to end our friendship here, or something along those lines. Yeah, absolutely. Or they could have said, hey, I'm not comfortable with XYZ, or I'd really need, ABC for this to be an effective relationship for me, right? Those are also incredibly valid because it does allow you to engage and collaborate if there is room, this one, for finding that sweet spot, right? What I want, what you want, here's the sweet spot in any relationship. Yeah. I can also see how easy it is for people to unintentionally manipulate others based on small changes in verbiage. Okay, so perfect for bringing this up. Perfect example. Here's the thing, right? Looking back on a relationship, we can spot how we were manipulated or how we slightly changed how we would do things based on how people acted, right? And so it's very easy after a relationship is over to say, they were manipulating me, right? They knew what they were doing, attributing it to malevolence or evil, when honestly, most of these things, as you just said, are incredibly unintentional. The thing is this, I mean, it's not that we don't intend to get our way. This is very important. We do intend to get our way. We want to get our way. We do. But we're not intentionally necessarily manipulating. We're just using language and verbiage and behaviors that have worked for us before. We have been trained over time to use this language, to say these things. Does that make sense? Yeah. Is it possible to know the meaning of manipulation but don't know how to detect manipulation? Of course it is. Of course it is. Very few people are really good at detecting manipulation, especially when it's happening. Especially when it's happening. Once I was in a funk around 18, and my BFF was reassuring me, and I came back with a cognitive distortion du jour. You're just saying that to make me feel better. And she responded, no, duh. Of course I care about you. So of course I want you to. Yes, absolutely. I care about you. So of course I want you to feel better. There is a huge concept out there, idea, a belief that all manipulation is bad. And I don't think that that's true, right? That's a perfect case in point where sometimes we do try to manipulate people into better moods. And that's okay, right? Yeah. I used to think that manipulation was always an intentional thing, but I think my mindset has shifted in recent months. Absolutely, Cosmopolite. And I am going to give you an example because I know that you work with dogs, right? I know you do. And you work with people who have dogs. And so I was at an event in Albany, Locke, this past weekend. And I said to the class, I said, so there's a behavior modification class that we were talking about. And I said, so how many people in here have ever had a dog? You know, so many people raised their hand. And then I said, and how many people here, their dog modified your behavior to sleep in the bed? Every single one of the hands stayed up. Every single one of them. Did the dog specifically intentionally manipulate? No. Does the dog, sit down and look at you with those big puppy eyes when they're young and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't just not let them jump up on me, right? Is the dog intentionally manipulating you? Does the dog even know what manipulation is? The dog is doing what the dog does naturally, and then what you positively reinforce with whatever the dog wants, usually attention, petting, whatever, sleeping on the bed, right? The dog is not intending to manipulate things. The dog is doing what works. Roger says, I'm not sure I consider comforting people manipulation. It's not always, but it can be. Maybe I'm going to move on. But maybe you can think about it and come up with a time that you have manipulated somebody into being happier or feeling more comforted or something. And you can share that. Or maybe not. Up to you. Okay, so let's talk about boundaries of various types and how they can be manipulative, shall we? So I've got some examples in the book. No, Cosmopolite. That wasn't specifically about dogs. That was comforting people in the sense that I was saying that in the case of what Joey put up there, I said some people try to manipulate people to cheer others up, to comfort them, right? But as you say in the next thing, people do often tell themselves that's what's happening. So that's the thing with dogs, right? We anthropomorphize them. We assign to them, oh, he's just doing that because he knows that, blah, 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 blah. No, he's doing that, the dog, because it's been rewarded before. And he will continue doing that for as long as there is hope of reward that outweighs the effort of doing it, right? Simple. So, boundary. And this is me, I need time and space to feel independent, right? I do. So a healthy expression of that boundary might be, I need a few nights a week set aside to do things for myself. I need a few nights a week where I am not committed to interacting with others, my partner, my partners, my date mates, going out to social events, things, right? I need a couple nights a week where it's just me. There may even be, for me, there may be other people around, but we're not engaged. I am not responsible for engaging with them, for entertaining them, for even being polite. For me, right? This is my boundary. I know this after years and years of, being me, right? So a healthy request based on that boundary might be, okay, so I feel stifled when we're constantly together. I might even use the term up each other's buttholes with no time apart. And I feel like recently we've been constantly on the go and doing things, and I haven't had any time to myself. So could you please make sure that you check with me before scheduling things? Because I really, really do need at least 2 nights a week where I can be in downtime, hanging out with myself mode, right? Simple. It takes responsibility for my boundaries and puts it squarely on me while explaining my boundary and making a reasonable request, right? Simple, healthy expression of a boundary. Okay, so let's talk about what that might look like if I were trying to manipulate someone, or if I were willing to put the responsibility for what I need on someone else's shoulders. How about, oh my God, you're so clingy and needy and you're smothering me with all this together stuff. You're going to drive me insane. See the difference? Seems pretty clear, right? And I'm pretty sure most of you have said something like that to somebody at some point in your life. I have, right? Maybe in a moment of pique or frustration, but that's freaking manipulation, right? It's trying to make somebody act a different way through manipulating their emotions and their beliefs about themselves instead of taking that responsibility onto your own shoulders to make it clear and setting or requesting that the boundary be honored. Okay, Joey. Does get the F out of my room count? I think get the F out of my room is pretty clear, right? Like that is definitely setting a boundary. It's not necessarily what I would consider collaborating, but by the time you're saying get the F out of my room, I think you're beyond collaboration and you're more into I'm shutting the portcullis so nobody can come in and locking this shit down for a while, right? Agree with me on that? Yeah. Okay. Let's look at another example. And if any of you have a specific example of a boundary that you have, I would love to run it through this same type of filter sort of on the fly instead of ones I have prepared. So don't hesitate to give me something that you think could be useful to you in your own life or people watching. So let's talk about a boundary. I don't want to have sex until I know someone well. Now, this is true of many people today, either because of religious or philosophical beliefs or because of demisexuality. I hear a lot of people saying that, culture of casual sex is very pervasive, but not everybody feels that way, right? And not everybody needs to feel that way. So let's say that this is your boundary. I prefer not to have sex until I know somebody well. So, healthy expression of the boundary. I really like getting to know someone intimately before getting sexual, right? Seems simple. Something that you could put up on a dating profile, right? Now, let's say you have to make a request based on that boundary. Maybe they're, seeming to push a little bit, or they seem like maybe they don't know that sort of thing. They didn't read that part of your dating profile. Surprise. So you say, you know what? I like you a lot and I'd love to get to know you better. Could we table any sort of sexuality for at least a month and revisit the question then? Simple, very clear, very precise. They then have a choice of engaging with you on the terms that you are willing to set for a relationship or not, right? That or not is important, or not, because they have a right to want to engage sexually. There are people who do not feel emotionally intimate easily or until they have had physical intimacy or sex, right? So there are some people who need to be emotionally intimate and close in order to have sex. And there are people who need to have sex in order to get emotionally intimate and close. Not a good match. And that's okay, right? Different people, different lives, different relationships. It's okay. Now, what is not okay is saying, if you really liked me, you'd wait to have sex with me. Or how about if you were a good person, this shouldn't be a problem for you. Somebody can be a good person, somebody can like you, and still feel that your sexual timetable doesn't suit their needs. And maybe it never will. That's okay. Right? Now, it could be that somebody who needs to have sex in order to get emotionally intimate doesn't mind waiting for this person to feel the emotional intimacy, as long as this person realizes that this person isn't going to necessarily feel that until fireworks. But usually, I have found in the people I've talked to, the disconnect between those two types is so great. There's no way around it. There's no compromise to be had there, because this person wants not just to feel the emotional intimacy, but also to feel it coming back to them. And if that can't happen, it just can't happen, right? That's okay. Different boundaries, different experiences, different lives, not a good fit, right? Cosmopolite says, I like that you're pointing out that we've all probably said something manipulative at one point or another. I've recently been focusing on labeling behaviors instead of people. Bam! That's huge. And actually, one of the chapters coming up in the book that I'm going to be writing relatively soon is why didn't you take no for an answer when somebody set their boundaries? And that is key, because bad people are not everywhere. Most people are pretty good. Most people are just living their lives. They might have a few, bad habits here or there or whatever, but not everyone is a monster. And not everyone who doesn't do things exactly the same way that you do is a monster, because every single one of us has pushed somebody else's boundaries trying to get our way. Every single one of us has manipulated somebody that we love trying to get our way. Period. End of story. There is no way that we have not in our lives at all, right? Never. Example to use, I've been trying to end or not start relationships with people who avoid conflict. Absolutely, right? Because if you avoid conflict, if you put it off to the side and you don't pay attention to it, those, in my experience, are usually the people where it's going to come roaring out when they're upset, right? I'm going to avoid it now. I'm not going to talk about it. Not going to fix these things. None of these things matter. Everything is good. Doesn't matter. Fine. It's fine. And then when things go wrong, it all comes crashing down. Kitchen sink. Everything matters then. Or if they're truly avoidant, they'll just avoid themselves right out of your life, right? Instead of just facing things head on. Sabyasashi says, I feel demanding sexually needs is terribly crossing boundaries. Okay, so there is a difference, I feel, between saying you owe me sex and I don't think we're going to be a fit, because I'm a hugely sexual person, and I like to really connect physically as soon as I'm sure there's a spark. You see, I mean, one is these are my standards and boundaries, and the other one is, again, you need to give this to me. Very different perspectives, in my opinion. When you least expect it, you may be influenced. Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the things I like to joke about, and Cosmopolite, you might get a kick out of this. Sometimes I say in my behavior modification class that sometimes humans are actually easier to train than dogs, because dogs are constantly like looking at you and wondering what you're up to, because there's that whole communication barrier, whereas humans feel like they can't be trained, so they're like do, nothing's going to happen to me. And all of a sudden, as you've probably seen from literally thousands of psychology studies, all of a sudden it's like, oh, look, these people all acted in exactly the same way based on this criteria, right? Because not thinking, not focusing, just doing whatever comes naturally. And that's easy to manipulate. Yeah. And again, there are ways to manipulate that are good for good reasons. I'm going to talk a little bit about those in my boundaries book when I come to enforcing boundaries. Today, I was actually writing this chapter called Whatever You're Not Changing, You're Choosing, which, for what it's worth, I don't agree with that quote. Whatever you are not changing, you are choosing, Laurie Buchanan. However, the point is reductionist to the point of absurdity. The quote is reductionist to the point of absurdity, but there are bits of truth hidden in that. And one of the things I talk about is the idea that we can actually change a lot more than we know if we pay attention to current psychology science and what's being done out there, and how we can actually manipulate ourselves into being better humans, feeling better about ourselves, and all of the things that go along with that. So, yeah. Cosmopolite says, not everyone is a predator or an abuser, but we hear and see those labels all day long, at least on FetLife. And in Facebook, right? There was somebody who posted a conversation that they had on Facebook dating, I guess. I've not been in there, but posted it with the person's picture and the person's name. And to me, it looked like nothing more than this person thought that they were talking like casually and in a fun way about like maybe getting together and dating and considering sex. And this person was talking very seriously about how dare you even bring that up to me before, XYZ. And I read this as, okay, this is a mismatch. And I simply would have said, thank you so much. I don't think we're a match. Best of luck to you. But instead, this person put them on blast, like I said, with their picture, with their name, and said, I can't believe people are like this. And a lot of people agreed with them. But it wasn't really bad. It was just different. So, yeah, I think there's a huge benefit to being able to say, this is not a fit for me, right? And to recognize when people are being manipulative, for whether they mean to or not, because at that point, it doesn't matter if they mean to. It's up to you to maintain your boundaries, right? It doesn't matter if they're an abuser. It doesn't matter if they're a narcissist. It doesn't matter how they feel about one thing or another. If you have good, strong boundaries and you follow the prime directive of putting your heart and your mind and your well-being first in relationships, right? If I told something tells me you're bad at sex based on the way you dance, is that manipulating? No. But I mean, what's the point of saying that? It seems not very nice. I'd just not have sex with them. Right? Like, you don't have to say, I think you're bad at sex. That's why I'm not going to have sex with you. You can just say, I don't think we're a good fit. Best of luck to you in everything. Roger says, it's funny, but most management classes are about manipulating people. I'm not sure people understand how to separate personal and business. So yes, a lot of what I would consider traditional business and management classes are very much about like, how do I get the most out of this person and get the most out of that person and keep an eye on these people and, control everything. But a lot of, like recently, it's been, how do I engage with my people and create a collaborative workforce that puts each and every one of us to our best skill sets. And that's really what a relationship is about, right? You want this, I want this bit in the middle, we both want, and we can collaborate on, and we can grow that to create our best lives together. As opposed to, how do I make you do what I want you to do so that this part here in the center grows? There's a big, big difference there, in my opinion. Okay, let's pause. Are there any questions right now? Do you have any examples you'd like to share with me? I've got another example that I can bring up here in just a few, for sure. Let's see. Okay, so another example. How about, I like to keep my emotions to myself until I've processed them. So some people are super duper, what's the word I'm looking for? Some people are super duper expressive, right? Emotive. So we're able to say, this is how I feel about something, and then talk our way through it by running our mouths, right? Because verbally, our verbal parts of our brain and our emotive parts of our brain are very, very closely linked, strongly connected, right? A lot of people are not like that. Some people have been manipulated, harmed in relationships where somebody else tried to force them to talk, to express themselves, to get it all out when they weren't ready. And then maybe when they weren't ready, because they weren't ready, they hadn't processed all of that, it came out wrong, or it was deliberately misunderstood and twisted, right? So saying something like, I like to keep my emotions to myself until I've processed them, is a good boundary. So an expression, healthy expression of that boundary might be, so I want you to know it can take a while sometimes for me to really come to grips with certain emotions. And so if we get into an argument, I may ask you to give me some time to think things through. I may need to remove myself from the situation for a while so that I can clear my head, right? Or if I could just say, can we put this conversation on hold and come back to it in about 2 days so I can really think it through when I've had some time to be alone, right? That seems fair. So a healthy request might be, can we drop this conversation for now and come back to it later? I need to really think about how I'm feeling. And because we're in the middle of a party with all of our friends, I'm not going to be able to do that here. And I want to make sure that I'm giving you the best of me. Right? Fair? I think that sounds fair. Now, when I was younger, I might not have thought that sounded fair. I might have pushed. No, no, no. Now we have to figure this out now. Like, we don't ever want to let things fester. I did that. I've done that to multiple partners in my life. Yeah, I was an emotional and verbal bully. Okay, so manipulation might be, like I'm feeling like I can't figure out my feelings right now. I need to escape from the situation so I can get my head on tight. And so I say to my partner, you're always wanting to talk about feelings. You're always like talking about feelings. I can't stand it. Why are you so sensitive? Why are you always wanting to talk about our relationship? Right? Putting the balance of the blame on them. Manipulation, right? Making them at fault for being able to verbally express their feelings and their emotions in that time, which is not terribly fair, right? And remember, we were talking about this before about you can be too much for somebody, and that's okay because you're still just right for yourself. So we all know how it feels to be too much or not enough. So earlier today, I was talking with two people that I consider part of my informal brain trust. People that I feel I can not only bounce ideas off of and get amazingly good feedback in return, but also people who I trust to challenge me on my thought processes, especially when I'm fudging them up in a royal fashion, right? And we don't talk constantly, but when we do talk, every single time I get inspired. Every time. Never doesn't happen. And one of them, Rory, says to me, says to the group that we have, so to me and another person, I think there is a massive psychological difference between the person who sees rules as a language you speak to excuse your actions and the person who sees rules as a way to clarify understanding. Now, for me, I'd like to say that exact thing, replacing the word rules with boundaries. So, there is a massive psychological difference between the person who sees boundaries as a language you speak to excuse your actions and the person who sees boundaries as a way to clarify understanding. So, isn't that what we're talking about today? Right? How to set a good boundary in a healthy way to clarify communication and understanding, right? Versus how to use a boundary to shift the blame onto another person, put the responsibility for any next steps or consequences directly on them and to say, okay, I've done my part. Right? Joey says, oh, yeah, sometimes when people say that's a boundary, it's actually a complaint they're cudgeling me over the head with. Oh, my goodness. Now, for what it's worth, I don't know if Rory is actually on right now, but for what it's worth, I'm pretty sure that both Rory and I can agree with you on that one. And that in the fact that we are both writers and we are both thinkers and we have both put things out into the world, and people will come onto those writings and say things like, oh my gosh, you're so right. I'm going to send this to fill in the blank here and show them how wrong they have been this whole time. And whoops, sorry about that. And for me, that's it's a little flattering, but it's also horrifying, because what I'm writing about boundaries and about manipulation is for you to improve yourself and your own life, not to go over and, not to print it all out and roll it up like a newspaper and then go bop people over the head with it. Nookie says this, bad person, right? That's not how this works. Boundaries are about ourselves, who we are, what we want out of life, where we end and others begin. Boundaries are what we can control, not about, again, manipulating others into being the people we want them to be, or into changing who they are. Cosmopolite, that rolling up the newspaper and bopping people over the head with it is especially for you because of the, dog connection that you and I have. But yeah, right? Or to take it another step further, oh my gosh, so-and-so and I had that exact conversation, and now I'm going to bring them here to your writing and shove their nose into their mess. Like, no, you are missing the point of all of this. Every bit of it. You don't get to tell other people how to live their lives. You don't get to try to control other people. And let me just say this, and Roger, this is for you. Why would you want to? I like to say the only people we can control are ourselves. And that imperfectly. Why? Why would anyone want to take on the added hassle of trying to control another human being who, by the way, doesn't want to be controlled? As somebody who's been in kink for years and who has enjoyed consensual power exchange relationships, I don't even want to control a lot of people who would love to be controlled by me consensually. Because you know why? That's a lot of work. And managing myself and the things that I like to do and I want to do is a lot. I want somebody who collaborates with me on this, not somebody that I have to fight every step of the way. Yeah? Y'all with me on this? I think you are. There are mantras where one means I am that, and the other is I am not that. And it sounds like enlightenment is about boundaries. I would say absolutely, to a certain extent, enlightenment, boundaries. I mean, if we are looking at boundaries as defining the limits of something, then boundaries is determining what is me, what is not me, what belongs inside of this, inside of the I will take care of this, I will take responsibility for this, and so on and so forth, and what belongs outside of that. And if you know perfectly what belongs inside and what belongs outside, you've probably reached enlightenment, possibly by a very different path. And again, that's okay, right? Anything out of context is usually being used to, and I'm going to assume that means manipulate them. Although I do think it's really amusing to think about anything out of context is usually being used to mutilate them because, it is October and that's spooky time. So that would be an amusing horror story of some sort. And it's like, I'm going to, rev up this chainsaw with your boundaries and use it to slice you. And anyway, a little silly. Okay, so I'm not seeing any additional questions coming in. We're hitting the hour. So real quick, another, just here's who I am. Here's what I do. Thank you so much for joining me today. Again, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Heather Claus, also known as Nookie. And I am currently writing my next book, Boundaries Are Sexy as Fuck. That is the working title. Live. Join me. Where is it? Here we go. With this link. It just popped in the chat and up on the screen. By pre-registering for my Take No Shit workshop beginning Monday, October 17th, I would love to have you. Thank you. Thank you all for joining me today. I always appreciate you. I love seeing the familiar faces and I love that there are new ones coming in, and look forward to next Tuesday, which is, no, this one. Next Tuesday, material boundaries. We're going to be talking about material boundaries, stuff, things, money. And we're going to go into how material boundaries integrate into our lives. Oh, Joey, you asked a good question. So when is you meant primal because you said primal. When is the primal event? We're not going to end up doing the primal event this fall. Too much going on with everything. My co-host of it is in the process of moving. I'm in the process of getting all of my medical stuff together. So we're going to probably put that to next June. Yeah. Sabyasachi says, love the scarf. Thank you. This was actually a gift from my sweetie in February of this year when we were on a little trip. It was the souvenir that he bought me for it. So I do love it as well. And now that it's now that it's cooler weather, I get to wear it more often. So yes. So thank you. Thank you all. Join me next Tuesday for material boundaries. And next Thursday is we're going to be talking about, ooh la la, sexual boundaries. Roar, roar, roar. Okay. Mwah. Thank you. Thank you all. Have an amazing day.